Yesterday, Israel carried out a strike in Rafah that killed at least 45 people and produced some of the most graphic pictures and videos we've seen so far in this war. I'm talking about decapitated children, body parts strewn all across the ground, bodies burned beyond recognition as massive flames engulfed a tent city in the southern portion of the Strip designed to house internally displaced Palestinian people. Now, this is very much a developing situation, so we're going to run through what we know so far, look at some official statements from the two sides, and then the reaction on the international stage as this news got out. Now, starting with a map overview to give you an idea of the area we're going to be talking about today. This is Live UA Map, a publicly available resource. We're going to focus in on Rafah, southern portion of the Gaza Strip here. Now, the reason that Rafah has gotten so much attention as of late is because Israel has just recently begun offensive operations into that area, as noted here in the light blue. Now, Rafah is largely believed to be kind of the last place that Palestinian civilians felt safe, if you will. It's also believed to be where a number of Israeli hostages are still held, be it alive or dead, and where a number of Hamas leadership are holed up. The reason for that is Israel's ground operations started in the north and progressively moved south. As they did so, they requested civilians to evacuate these areas and move where they could, and that area was south. What that has meant is, over the course of this war, Rafah has seen a massive influx of Palestinian civilians, and we've seen quite a few tent cities pop up, temporary housing for the people that cannot yet move back to their homes in the central or northern portion of the Gaza Strip. The numbers here are hard to grasp. I've heard as many as 1 million Palestinians at one point were in the Rafah area, which is way overcrowded, like 5x the number that was there before the war. But either way, looking at satellite imagery, you can see that it is just crammed full of people, which is why there's a lot of attention as Israel began their ground operations into this area. Now, as a little context, yesterday, Hamas launched 8 rockets from Rafah into Israel. A handful of those were intercepted, others landed in open fields. Israel then responded with a strike against that rocket launch location. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that was a separate event than what we're going to talk about here in a second. So that response did take place. Israel struck the rocket launch location. There wasn't any significant battle damage assessments that came out of that. And it is a separate event than this strike that led to at least 45 deaths and massive fires in another portion of Rafah, specifically the Tel al-Sultan refugee camp a little bit further to the west. Additionally, I saw some reporting from Al Jazeera that this strike took place in a designated safe zone. I don't think that's entirely accurate, at least from what I've been able to tell so far, but there's a little bit of nuance here. So it looks like the area where this strike took place around the Tel al-Sultan refugee camp was not designated a safe area. However, it was also not an area that the IDF had yet called on for civilians to evacuate. And if we look at recent leaflets and announcements made to the Palestinian civilians in Rafah asking them to evacuate, it's piece by piece. So this was not a large-scale evacuation of everybody in the entire portion of South Gaza leave. It was bit by bit. And from what I've been able to see so far, this strike took place outside of those two areas. It was not in a designated safe zone, but it was also not in an area that Israel had yet asked to evacuate. I want to add also that there has not yet been a full, formal, independent investigation of any sorts into what happened here. So we're having to look at a variety of reports coming off the ground from the two different sides, as well as some external actors based off what they know so far. Now, the reason this is so significant is just a few days ago, the ICJ, International Court of Justice, who's currently hearing the genocide case being brought forward by South Africa against Israel, requested that Israel stop all operations in Rafah. They said, quote, Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah government, which could bring about the physical destruction of the Palestinians. Now, following that, there was no indication that Israel is going to slow down at all, and we saw the continuation of Israeli activities, and as mentioned just a few moments ago, the continuation of Hamas launching rockets from Rafah into Israel. But that's a little bit of the background, the context as to how this whole situation is playing out. Now, starting with a Hamas statement of what played out in the past 24 hours, they said, in a horrific war crime, the criminal Zionist occupation army committed a heinous massacre against displaced citizens in tense western Rafah city this evening, in an area crowded with hundreds of thousands of displaced people and declared as a safe zone by the criminal army. which resulted in the death and injury of dozens of citizens, most of them women and children, in a complete defiance and disregard for the decision of the International Court of Justice that demanded it stop its aggression against Rafah. Again, and prove me wrong if I'm wrong here, it's important information, but I don't believe that this area was designated a safe zone. Not from anything I've seen. That doesn't solve the issue here at all, but it is an important piece of this conversation. Hamas continued by saying, "We hold the U.S. administration and President Biden in particular fully responsible for this massacre, which the Zionist entity would not have committed without the U.S. support and green light for it to invade Rafah, despite its crowdedness and with displaced citizens." And it's going to be an interesting aspect here to see how the United States and others actually react. More than just strong words, are there going to be actions, maybe slowing arms sales or some move on the international stage to try to pressure Israel to stop what they're doing in Rafah? It's not clear. That hasn't really happened quite yet. In wrapping up, Hamas said the international community, the United Nations, and all relevant parties are urgently required to take action to stop the war of genocide that has been continuing against our people for more than 7 months and provide protection for our people from the Zionist killing and terror machine that seeks to displace our people and obliterate their national cause. Then getting into some of the IDF statements here as well, they immediately responded, put out information about this strike, as they largely have done throughout this war. They said, quote, "An IDF aircraft struck a Hamas compound in Rafah in which significant Hamas terrorists were operating a short while ago. The strike was carried out against legitimate targets under international law through the use of precise munitions and on the basis of precise intelligence that indicated Hamas's use of the area. The IDF is aware of reports indicating that as a result of the strike and fire that was ignited, several civilians in the area were harmed. The incident is under review." So I have seen the random speculation that this was a failed Hamas rocket. I think we can probably put that to bed because Israel is claiming responsibility for the strike in this area. Now, whether there was something on the ground that kind of ignited and made this fire get bigger and larger and spread wider, we'll wait and see for that investigation. But again, the random one-offs out there talking about a failed Hamas rocket, there's no indications of that at this point. And again, Israel has claimed responsibility for the strike that appears to have started this fire. Now, Israel later came out and announced the death of two, or the target of that strike, saying that they killed two commanders in Hamas's West Bank organization that were operating in Gaza, so kind of serving as a liaison between Hamas and Gaza, facilitating operations, directing operations in the West Bank. They say those two were Yassin Rabia and Khalid Nagar. Now, I did see some folks kind of posting this saying this is tone deaf. We're talking about dozens of civilians have just been killed, and you're putting out a statement talking about these two Hamas leaders. You're completely missing the point. I disagree. I think it was really important to put those names out there. Without that, it looks like Israel just dropped bombs on a group of civilians. So whether it was the right move to conduct that strike or not, whether it was reckless or not, I think all of that aside, it's important to get the information that there was an actual target there that they were going after. So I think Israel made the right move here, announcing that those two senior leaders, they believe, were killed in this strike. Now, looking at some responses from around the world, as well as in Israel and Gaza, the Palestinian presidency on Monday accused Israel deliberately targeting civilians, saying, quote, "The perpetration of this heinous massacre by the Israeli occupation forces is a challenge to all international legitimacy resolutions," adding that Israeli forces deliberately targeted the tents of displaced peoples. Israel's top military prosecutor added that the details of this incident are still under investigation, which we are committed to conducting to the fullest extent, adding that the Israeli army regrets any harm to non-combatants during the war. Then turning to some of the reactions from outside of Gaza, Qatar called the attack that killed at least 40 Palestinians a grave violation of international laws. And I want to be clear, there was a lot of reactions around the world, mostly just like that, just repeating words very similar to that. I'm not going to go through all of them because it was a ton of countries and a ton of individuals from around the world. I'm trying to highlight just some of the key ones that really stood out to me here. French President Emmanuel Macron spoke up saying, quote, "These operations must stop. There are no safe areas in Rafah for Palestinian civilians. I call for full respect for international law and an immediate ceasefire." Turkish President Erdogan added, quote, "We will do everything possible to hold these barbarians and murderers accountable who have nothing to do with humanity." It's one of the stronger reactions I've seen so far. And then the Italian defense minister said, quote, "There's an increasing difficult situation in which the Palestinian people are being squeezed without regards for the rights of innocent men, women, and children who have nothing to do with Hamas, and this can no longer be justified." He added that we are watching the situation with despair. And then a prominent Gazan who is affiliated with Fatah wrote on Facebook earlier today, and this was reported on the Abu Ali Express Telegram channel, quote, "The problem is when their seniors of Hamas stay in a tent among the tents of displaced peoples and hardworking residents. You are senior officials, and you know you are wanted. In the name of Allah, take your tent to an isolated area and away from the common people and civilians. Do not use them as a shield for you, because that makes you a criminal, not a fighter. I wish you were in the place meant for you, on the front line of defense against the trouble you and your gang brought upon us." Now, I wanted to save this one for last for a couple of reasons. First, there's no attributable source there, right? It's an unnamed prominent Gazan. So take that for what it's worth. Be careful with taking that as an official source. But I did want to mention it because I have seen that sentiment voiced across Telegram, Twitter, social media, and a variety of media reports, saying, hey, we have to recognize the fact that Hamas is embedding themselves in some of these civilian encampments, putting the civilians around them at risk. So that's about where all of this sits right now. Again, very much a developing situation. I'll do my best to try to keep you in the loop as more information comes out here. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested, be sure to check out our Substack, which is linked in the description below. It talks about a variety of national security subjects, inclusive of Hezbollah, Hamas, Israel, Iran, and other major issues ongoing in the Middle East. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.